Hello, Beaufort Middle School students. This is Mrs. Brigman, and we are so excited you are joining us today. Today we are going to begin our brand new unit. This is Unit 3, Ratios and Proportional Relationships. Before we begin this unit, let's talk about the things that we hope you take with you at the conclusion of this unit. These are your enduring understandings. By the end of this unit, we hope you understand that fractions, decimals, and percents can be used interchangeably, and that you also know how to convert between the three. Second, we hope you understand the relationships and rules that govern whole numbers. Third, we hope that you understand that in order to add or subtract fractions, you must have a like denominator. We call these common denominators. Fourth, and fifth, we hope that you understand when you multiply or divide one number by another, you may get a product or a quotient that is bigger than the original number, smaller than the original number, or perhaps equal to the original number. And finally, we hope you understand the definition of ratio and that ratios use division to represent relationships between two quantities. Today we're going to begin with Lesson 1 entitled Ratios. Please find your guided notes and make sure that you are paying attention to the video, filling in all blanks and definitions, and also any examples that the teacher is completing on the screen. Anything that is being written on the screen needs to be written in your guided notes as well. All right, we're going to be looking at how you would use ratios in the real world, and we're going to start with an example from the sport of baseball. We are going to be comparing the wins to losses during the 2001 spring training season. But before we begin, let's start with the definition of ratio. Find your vocabulary word ratio in your guided notes and please write the definition. And the definition that I want you to write is this first sentence. A ratio uses division to compare, and underline the word compare, underline or highlight, because a ratio is simply a comparison of two numbers. Also, for your definition, please add part to part, over part. Ratios compare a part to part. If you look at our picture down here, if I wanted to compare the number of baseballs compared to the number of bats, the part, this is all the equipment, the part that represents the baseballs would be 1, 2, 3, and the part that represents the bats would be 1, 2, 3, 4. So the ratio of baseballs to bats would be 3 to 4. This is a ratio, it is a part-to-part comparison. Remember, if you need to press pause anytime throughout the course of this video, please do so that you can write down any important information. All right, let's talk about the three ways to write ratios. Those three ways are words, numbers, and algebra. Please find the table in your guided notes and you're going to fill in each of these columns with the appropriate words. So for words, we're going to be comparing wins to losses. And when using words, since we're comparing the wins to the losses, you can see that we have written wins first and losses second. In the fraction version, wins will be in the numerator's position. Since wins comes first, you always put your first category in the numerator's position. And then your second category will be in the denominator's position. And finally, the third way to write using words, you would use the colon, wins to losses. Using numbers, we'll simply plug in the numbers, and if we were to use the chart, the previous chart, there were 18 wins for the LA Dodgers, and there were 13 losses. You can see that we've used the word to show this ratio. And just below we have the fraction version. The first number needs to go in the numerator's position. The second number needs to go in the denominator's position. This is read 18 to 13. And then finally the colon, again, we've just plugged in the numbers for the categories. There were 18 wins and 13 losses. Finally, in algebra, we know that variables represent unknown quantities. So these variables represent any number that could change. So this is read A to B, where B is non-zero, A to B, where B is non-zero, and finally A to B, the colon, where B is non-zero. B can never, the second number can never be 0 because you cannot have 0 in the denominator's position. All right, and just below this, let's just remember that all three ways of writing the ratio would be read 18 to 13, 18 to 13, or 18 to 13. The word to, the fraction bar, and the colon all mean you would say the word to in that position when you're reading it out loud. All right, your second vocabulary word is equivalent ratios, and equivalent ratios are two ratios that have the same value. So please write this last sentence here in this box. Two ratios are equivalent ratios when they have the same value. And some examples for you would be 1/2 is a ratio, 1 to 2 is equivalent to the ratio 5 to 10. You can see if you reduce 5 over 10, it would reduce to 1/2. So these are called equivalent ratios. All right, let's try an example with writing a ratio. We're going to look at the 2001 spring training, and for this particular example, we're going to be looking at the Chicago Cubs and their wins and losses. We're going to make comparisons or ratios about the games played. Let's first write a ratio of wins to losses for the Chicago Bears. There were 17 wins, you can see from our chart here, and there were 14 losses. Now, because wins comes first in your word version of the ratio, you want your number of wins to go in the numerator's position because it comes first. Losses come second, so we're going to write 14 in the denominator's position. The most important thing that you need to remember when writing ratios is that order does matter. Since wins came first, we place that number in the numerator, and since losses came second, we place that number in the denominator. Part B says wins to games played. The wins, again, for the Chicago Bears was 17. Now, to figure out the games played, you do have to do a little bit of computation. We'll add the wins and the losses for a total of 31 games played. So the ratio of wins to games played is 17 to 31. All right, now it is your turn. Use the table above to write the ratio for the Padres. Remember, you're looking at the San Diego Padres and the information here. Press pause on your video screen, write these three ratios, and your teacher will go over them with you tomorrow in class. All right, for example 2, we're going to talk about writing ratios in simplest form. You should always reduce your ratios, and that's what this example is going to show us. So let's take a look at the example. It says amusement parks. A ride on a roller coaster lasts 2 minutes. Suppose you wait in line for an hour and a half to ride the roller coaster. Follow the steps below to find the ratio of time spent in line to the time spent on the ride. Well, when you're working with word problems, the best thing to do is start with the question. What is the question asking you to find? And it's saying to find the ratio of time spent in line compared to the time spent on the ride. We are looking for a ratio. So we know that we're going to compare the time spent in line compared to the time spent on the ride. And since in the question the time in line came first, it needs to go in the numerator's position. Time spent on the right came second, so it goes in the denominator's position. Always write your ratios in the order that they are written. All right, let's try to fill in some of this information that we know. We know the ride on the roller coaster lasts 2 minutes. That's some important information, and that we're waiting in line for an hour and a half. What we want to do first is take these two pieces of information and we're going to plug them into the appropriate spot in the ratio. But first we need to make sure our units are the same. We know that the ride on the roller coaster lasts 2 minutes, so the time on the ride is going to be 2. Let me switch the color here. 2 minutes. And time in line is an hour and a half. Well, we don't want to write 1.5 hours because we won't have the same units. We need the units to match. So how many minutes is an hour and a half? Well, I know 1 full hour is 60 minutes. I know half an hour is 30 minutes. So an hour and a half total is going to be 90 minutes. And that will be your time spent in line compared to your time on the ride. Now, when you finish writing your ratio, ask yourself, is this ratio simplified? And in this case, it is not. We can divide the top and the bottom, and you simplify ratios the same way you simplify fractions. Find a common factor. 90 divided by 2 is 45, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. So your ratio of time spent in line to time spent on the ride is 45 to 1. You could also write this 45:1. That would be read 45 to 1. Or you could use the word 2, 45 to 1. All right. Last example for today, we are going to talk about comparing ratios, and that's looking at two separate ratios and seeing which one is greater and which one is the least. And this example is about music. It says Luis and Amber compared their CD collections. To determine who has a greater ratio of rock CDs to pop CDs, write the ratios. So below here you see our steps, and sorry about that. First, we're going to write the ratios as fractions, and we are comparing rock CDs compared to pop CDs. Because rock comes first, we want that to be our numerator, and then the number of CDs of pop CDs will be in the denominator. So let's take a look at the chart and see how many rock CDs and pop CDs did Luis have. It looks like Luis has... see if I can scroll this up for us. Okay, there we go. He has 9 rock CDs and 24 pop CDs. Now, this is his ratio of rock to pop. My suggestion would be to always simplify first. 3 would be a common factor, so 9 divided by 3 is 3. 24 divided by 3 is 8. And then, since we are comparing, we're going to write these fractions as decimals in order to compare. And we've learned in prior units to convert a fraction to a decimal, you simply divide. This is 3 divided by 8. First come, first serve. All right, when you divide this out, we'll go ahead and do that now. Eight goes into 60 7 times. That would be 56. It's 4 left over. Drop another 0, so it looks like 8 goes into 40 5 times. So as a decimal, 3/8 is the ratio. Is written 0.375 or 375 thousandths. That decimal represents the ratio of Luis's rock to pop CDs. Now for Amber, again, we'll scroll up and look at her ratio of rock to pop. It would be 42 compared to 70. So we'll write 42 over 70, And again, my suggestion would be definitely to simplify first. I can think of a common factor of 7. That would be 6 over 10, and that looks like it'll reduce again. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So we've got 3/5 here. And again, we'll divide that out. 3 divided by 5. First come, first serve. And Amber's ratio is equivalent to 0.6. So using our knowledge of comparing decimals and place value, you can see that 0.6 is greater than 0.375. So Amber has the greater ratio of rock to pop CDs. All right, guys, now it is your turn. Using the music table above of Luis and Amber's CDs, please answer these 2 questions. Your teacher will go over them with you tomorrow in class. Have fun.